Welcome everyone to Pre-Health Spotlight's interview series for fall 2020. Today we have Dr. Layla Banihashemi talking with us, and she is a assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry here at the University of Pittsburgh. And let's get right into it. So could you tell us a little bit more about your position here?
So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. As you said, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry. I am the director of a laboratory called the Brain Body Stress Laboratory, and we study visceral neural circuits, so circuits that connect the brain and the body and that are involved in regulating or controlling stress responses.
Very interesting. And we talked briefly about your research regarding adverse childhood experiences in our podcast a couple weeks ago. Could you generally cover it again for our listeners today?
Sure. So we're looking at childhood adversity and how it influences these stress-related pathways. So we look at pre-autonomic pathways and viscerosensory pathways and how those might be different as a result of people who have these different backgrounds. So we look at people that have had backgrounds with low to moderate, all the way up to severe to extreme levels of abuse or neglect. And more recently, we're looking at how threat experiences, so abuse or trauma, might be different from deprivation experiences, so neglect or cognitive deprivation, how those might influence the circuitry differently.
Very interesting. So my first impression when I hear that is that your research would be very interesting to the many neuroscience majors that are here at Pitt, which is interesting because when I was talking to the undergraduate who works in your lab, Jessie, she told me that you went to Pitt yourself for undergrad, right?
I did, yeah.
That's awesome.
I've been at Pitt a really long time. Since 1999 was when I started as an undergraduate. And I was a neuroscience major as well. And so I went through the neuro program, and I think it's a great place to get a wonderful education. And there's so many opportunities here to get involved in research, and I don't know, Pitt's wonderful. You can't really beat it and everything it has to offer.
It must be so rare to see someone who's as involved in a department at a university for 20 some years and at such a young age as yours, because usually I feel like it might be, tenured professors who are more at later stages in their career. But since you've been in the neuroscience department ever since you were an undergraduate, you must be very entrenched and probably one of the most familiar, even though you're at an earlier stage in your career.
So, I have bounced around a little bit. I was in the neuroscience program as an undergrad, and then I did a master's program that was just in the neuroscience department. And then the doctoral program is sort of larger. So that's the Center for Neuroscience at the University of Pittsburgh. And that spans different departments. So it spans, neuroscience as well as neurobiology. And then I was also involved in the Center for Neural Basis of Cognition, which is kind of like a parallel program. And then as a postdoc, that's when I moved over to the psychiatry department. And so I've been in the psychiatry department as a postdoc and then as faculty.
I see.
Yeah. And so to parallel that, my research as a master's student and a doctoral student that was focused on neuroanatomy and animal models, looking at these stress-related circuits. And then as a postdoc, I transitioned to really wanting to have a clinical impact and really wanting to, engage more with the human experience. And so as a postdoc, I started studying humans. And so I was looking to kind of translate, I was looking at early experience and maternal separation in rodent models And so I was trying to transition to looking at early experience in humans.
I
And
see.
that's when I started looking at childhood adversity and how it might influence those same set of circuits.
So would you say that having that basic science background from your master's and PhD years really helped as a clinical researcher?
I would say so. I mean, I think it's a unique background to have as an imager. I think a lot of people come to imaging as neuroimaging as a psychologist, and that's not to say that that's not to say that psychologists don't have a good understanding of neuroanatomy, because many do. But I just think it offered me kind of a unique opportunity to continue examining a set of circuits that neuroimagers weren't really looking at, because these were kind of smaller regions of the brain and more difficult to identify using neuroimaging techniques. So like right now, we've gone all the way up to looking at these circuits using 7 Tesla neuroimaging, so ultra high field neuroimaging, to be able to like really precisely identify these structures in the human brain. So, I mean, I think it gave me a unique perspective, and it gave me the ability to kind of craft novel questions.
So going back to your undergraduate years, do you think there was a pivotal experience or moment that unlocked your passion for research and motivated you to pursue a career in academia?
As an undergraduate, I would say I didn't take full advantage of the opportunities that are available at Pitt. I was a very dedicated student in terms of, my nose was like always in a book, and I was really, really focused on my courses. And so I think that's what led me to do the master's program, was that I didn't feel like I really delved deeply into a research experience as an undergraduate. And so the master's kind of gave me like a full 2 years of just kind of focusing in on research. I mean, I've just always been really intrigued by the brain and how, it's our brain that essentially makes us who we are and forms all our perceptions. And so I've just always been really interested in the brain. The very first class I took as an undergraduate was brain and behavior, taught by Dr. Bill Skaggs. And I just remember even just talking about like different functions of the brain, like regulating homeostasis. Like I found it so interesting that the brain controls all these different aspects of who we are in our bodies. That I would say that was my very first class. I remember talking to my freshman advisor about like what my schedule was going to look like that first fall semester. And I remember being like, what is this neuroscience thing?
Right.
I had never had that in high school or previously. I'd never had any real exposure to the brain at all.
Right.
And I remember him saying like, yeah, we'll take a class, see if you like it. And I remember that just being like my favorite course, one of my favorite courses that I took all throughout undergrad, really.
That's awesome. So that's interesting because I feel like today there's a lot of pressure for undergrads to make their career path as linear as possible, right? Get out, like go into undergrad, know exactly what you're doing, take the right steps at every single juncture to get to where you want to be. And it seems like you unlocked your passion for research over time rather than knowing it right away. And that's okay. And that is still possible to be successful and get to where you want to be, even if you don't know what you want right away.
Yeah, I think that's really perceptive. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had, I think being an undergrad is so hard. And you're right. I think there is a lot of pressure to know what you want to do right away, especially like if you're on a medical track or, you want to go to dental school or get into nursing. Like those are things that, they're like multi-step processes and that require many years. And so it seems like they do kind of want you to know that going in. but yeah, I mean, I really struggled with what I wanted to do and what I wanted to study throughout undergrad. And, there's the pressure of like picking something practical and something that you can make a living with. Um, and that's a pressure that's kind of difficult to bear, I think, at such a young age. But every alternative that I looked at was not as interesting to me as neuroscience. And so I did my best to explore different paths. So I was, interested in environmental studies. I was interested in biological sciences. So I tried to explore these different paths, and I kept coming back to neuroscience as like, no, this is really what I'm the most interested in. And I kind of just let that guide my decision making step by step. So yeah, I don't think I think it's very rare that people have it figured out from the get-go. Yeah. And like, good for them. That's wonderful.
Yeah, those are some lucky people. Yeah.
Exactly. But I don't think the average among us, the average individual can't have it figured out. And I think that's because we haven't had as much exposure to things. We haven't been exposed to all the different paths that are available to us. And I think that's part of the undergraduate process, is going through that exploration and that exposure to different ideas and experiences. So I think without that, like, how are you supposed to know,
Right.
And
Yeah,
there are things, exactly. And there are subjects that may have appealed to you as a high school student that, I was really interested in chemistry when I was in high school. And when I got to undergrad and took a chemistry course, I lost all interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, and I think it was just because I had a very dynamic chemistry teacher when I was in high school. And without that presence, it sort of lost its luster.
I see.
And so, I think you have to kind of dive deeply into subjects to know what's going to hold your interest and sustain you over time.
Another problem that undergraduates face is that the journey only begins once you've decided what you want to do, because that's the first step. And again, your path may not be as linear as you think it's going to be once you've set yourself on that road. So in that respect, what do you think have been some of the most pivotal challenges in your career, from being an undergraduate to being a graduate student to being in a faculty position as you are right now? What's shaped your current career professionally, and also what's shaped the person that you are today by those challenges that you faced along the road?
So I think there are a couple moments where life just felt especially hard. So my parents are immigrants, and I think as a first generation American, there's like an extra layer of pressure to succeed and be successful in all the ways that our culture here defines success. And so during my master's, I really questioned whether to continue on a research path or go to medical school. And so that was a really challenging time for me. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about like not having it figured out. Like, I still didn't have it figured out. I was still kind of questioning whether I wanted to take a different path. The thing that helped me get through it was just getting really clear about what I wanted in life. I think that going toward a doctoral path where you're doing unique research is I think it's a very special thing. Nobody's really telling you what to learn. You're doing work under a particular umbrella, the umbrella of your advisor's work, but you're really kind of carving out your own unique way. And I think that really appealed to me. Throughout your educational history, you're being told what to read, what to learn, you're being tested on certain material. And a doctoral path is not like that. There are certainly tests and challenges, but you're looking at a scientific literature as a whole, and you're trying to piece all these different elements together, and you're trying to identify a gap that you can begin to address yourself.
Mm.
And so I think that the newness of that way of learning was really special and fascinating to me, and one that I felt like I wanted to engage in at the time. One of the things that is required of you on this path for many of us in the sciences is to get what's called an Early Career Development Award, or KO1, from the National Institute of Health. Like, that's a really big milestone. And I had been working diligently on my KO1. I was 2 weeks away from its deadline internally, like within our department. And I received a diagnosis of breast cancer. And, I was 2 weeks away from submitting this thing. And then I got this breast cancer diagnosis. And I think for me, that was, I think anytime you're facing a major life illness, either for yourself or a loved one, you tend to reevaluate everything that's going on. And for me, and perhaps this is not that abnormal, but I just felt like nothing was important anymore. Like
Right.
my K, like nothing's important, just me, doing what I had to do to get back to being healthy. And I got very, very good advice from my advisor. So my postdoctoral advisor had said, you're so close, you're so close to having this thing done and out the door. I think if you can, do your best to just get it submitted. So in the sciences, the review process is very long. So you submit a grant and it goes into review, and it's gone for months until you hear back. And so I, over the course of that 2 weeks, was learning about cancer, because that was something I had never really thought about. It was not on my radar. And I was a young woman at the time, and during the course of that 2 weeks, I was learning more about that. And then I was also like wrapping up my KO1 and getting that submitted. And I ended up getting my KO1 in time. And I just really hold fast to that advice, because, I was able to get it submitted, go through, I had chemotherapy, so I was able to go through that process. I believe I even had surgery before the reviews came back. So I was able to like focus on my health for a time, and then, deal with the reviews when they got back. I share this for anyone else that's kind of struggling with a major life event or a major life crisis, that, there's a way through it. And like, all is not lost. And then I would say, and I think this is an obstacle, I think, for everyone in the sciences, then you have the K to R transition. So you have your Early Career Development Award, and then you try to get an Independent Investigator Award, which is the big RO1 from NIH. And so that's another obstacle, which many of us in the sciences face. And so persistence, I think, persistence,
Right,
is key.
having gone through such a personal crisis at a critical juncture in your career and come out the other end both healthy and successful in your career venture, what perspective do you think that's yielded regarding your current balance of focusing on work and focusing on things outside of work?
In many ways, I think the biggest thing that it changed for me was I was just so hard on myself, and I put so much pressure on myself. The first thing that came out of the diagnosis was like, wow, I need to be way less hard on myself, and I'm putting pressure on myself that's undue. The burden of this stress, of this pressure that I'm putting on myself, that is probably really unnecessary and really unhealthy. I'd like to say I don't stress about things anymore, but that's certainly not true. I definitely still stress out, and but I think that initial element of like how hard I was on myself has diminished a lot.
So now that you've achieved your Independent Investigator Award from the NIH, what are some future projects that you're looking forward to?
So one of the things I'm really interested in, and a new direction that I'd like to go in, is complementary and alternative therapies. And so I've always been really interested in yoga and meditation, and yoga has been a big part of my journey, kind of healing from the experience and the trauma of cancer treatments. And so while it's always been an interest, I think it's become more salient, over the past, 8 to 10 years. So something that I would really like to study is how techniques like slow controlled breathing, meditation, these types of complementary and alternative approaches can help individuals with these backgrounds of adversity from their childhood kind of regulate their responses to stress. So that's one of the things that I hope to study. I had written a pilot grant, a very small pilot grant, to look at slow controlled breathing and how it might influence stressor-evoked activity in the brain.
To close out, what is some advice that you have for undergraduates that are interested in either a career in academia or pursuing a master's or PhD in the biomedical sciences? What kind of research opportunities or extracurriculars should they seek out? What should their mindset be? Things like that.
That's a really good question. You have, I'm sure, plenty of resources for like the kinds of classes you should do. And, I'm sure you're already being told, get research experience. If you can get on some publications, that would be great. If you can go to a conference and present, like that's great too. And all of that is stuff that I'm sure you and everyone listening already knows. So I would just say to get really clear for yourself what path you want to go down. I think for a lot of people, there's like a divergence with clinical work and research. And some people can combine those, and some are very, very good at doing that. A lot of people with medical degrees do research, they do very well. But I think being like really honest with yourself about what you actually want to do and how you want to spend the time of, the hours of your life day to day. Like a lot of times I think we glamorize a particular path and what it'll look like and what it'll feel like, but think about the activities that you'll be engaged in day to day and whether that appeals to you or not. And really keep your eyes open about everything that a certain path entails. So like a research path, when you get to a particular level, involves managing other people, keeping an eye on participants that are being recruited from the community. So there's a lot more involved than like I'm sitting at my desk, although there's a lot of that, I'm sitting at my desk, I'm pouring through the literature, I'm doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of analysis. So think about all the different elements that are involved in a given path and get really honest with yourself about how you want to spend your time and what feels not most natural, because there's a lot of training involved for things to feel natural, but just how is it that you want to spend your time? That's my biggest advice. I think a lot of times I think students feel like there's a path they should pursue for a variety of different reasons, pressures from family or other types of pressures we put on ourselves. And, I think getting really clear with yourself and being really honest with yourself about what you want is the best advice that I can give, really.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us. That's all we have for today. I'm sure many people are going to find this extremely insightful, very interesting, and very helpful. So thanks again for agreeing to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me.